Welcome back to the Win with Dice podcast, the podcast featuring members of the Win with Dice team. I'm Calvin, and I'm joined here by Ramon.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the podcast. Calvin and I like to take a casual approach to the hobby, so we like to talk about the games that we run and the games that we play and the cool, wonderful people we get to experience the hobby with. If it's your first time kind of hearing about tabletop RPGs, what are you doing? Go find some friends and a table and some dice and get to rolling. But if you are a player at someone's table, maybe it's your turn to jump behind the GM screen and run a little thing for your table.
Indeed. So this week, I'm full of energy right now because I've just come back from hanging out at the Origins convention. And we're going to get to talking about that a bit. I'm just going to talk about some of the stuff that I did there. One of the games I was actually involved in running, which was very cool. The Origins Game Fair, I should say, so I can get the name correctly, in the Greater Columbus Convention Center. We'll get into all those details. And as well, if there's time this week, we did want to talk about the Howl of the Wild book, which we briefly mentioned a couple episodes ago, or at least a couple of weeks ago. We'll get into more details on that, including some of the new ancestries and some other details from the book that I think will be a whole lot of fun for people to play with. But before we get into all of that awesome stuff, we have to get to the most important part of the show, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week.
Yes, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week, brought to you by me.
Yay!
Yay! Okay, so Tip of the Week for this week, folks. I don't know if you guys have Netflix or not, but there's a kick-ass anime that's airing right now called Delicious in Dungeon, or Dungeon Meshi, if you take the Japanese title. And it is a wonderful show that if you are a DM in a fantasy setting, a la Fantasyland D&D, there's just so much to take from. And the coolest part about that show is the way that they distill all this kind of lore and stuff, and the way that the world works into the way of what do things eat and how do they eat it, right? I think it's such a integral part of any setting to be realized. It's if you're alive, you have to eat, right? So if things exist in the world, what do they eat? And that could answer so many questions about how your world works, if you're homebrewing, or even if those questions aren't answered from the pre-written material, that's license for you to work out, and it will make your players feel like they're in a living, breathing world, because they literally have to eat, right? So how they go about that, that's up to you. But yeah, just I think that show is really good. I just wanted to gush about it. Senshi is the best. And make sure you remember to add into your worlds, what do people eat? Local cuisines, what do they have to do to prepare the food? All sorts of stuff can impact your world and make those little details really make the world feel lived in.
Yeah, just something as simple as just having specific kinds of foods at specific places really does make the world feel larger than just the adventure happening around the player characters.
Yeah, and specifically I think that we kind of gloss over the fact that each individual race in Fantasyland, they're actually aliens. There's no your internals inside of a elf versus a dwarf are very different. So why would you guys be able to eat the same things all the time, right? So maybe the rations for a dwarf may be different for an elf, or what is considered to be a full meal, different calorie intakes, all that kind of stuff can be yours to play with, and little dials you can do to kind of tweak stuff. Because how do people get water? How do people grow food, right? These things are big, major problems that the real world has to figure out how to do. So why wouldn't the fantasy world need to worry about that, right? So that's why you got to answer those questions.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get into the meat of the episode. Ironically, since we're talking about food.
Yeah, pun definitely intended by Calvin.
Yeah, so that... Sorry, Ramon, was there anything else you want to say on the tip of the week?
No, that's it. That's tip of the week, folks.
All right, so I was about to say this week because time is weird and wonderful, but last week I was down at the, again, as I said, the Columbus Convention Center in Columbus, Ohio, for the Origins Game Fair. which is actually, it was my first time at a specifically gaming convention. I've been to Fan Expo a couple of times, got some autographs, saw some comic stuff, but this was my first time at a just straight up gaming convention. And it was a whole lot of fun. I got to play in some games, I took part in running a game, and I got to hang out in a pretty nice hotel room and kind of just lounge out some days when I didn't feel like being around people. So a whole lot happened, and I kind of wish I made notes on everything that I did, but I really didn't. So I'm just going to go over some stuff that I did, and Ramon, you can, if anything sounds interesting, you could comment on it as we go.
I was gonna say, next time you go to a gaming convention, we should do like a man on the street segment where like you just record people. We'll give you a microphone and just be like, hey.
That should be very fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I flew down, and also this is my first time flying since like in like 20 years basically. I realized I don't think I like flying, and I don't know if I'm gonna get used to it.
That's funny. Okay.
But I did fly down. I was at the hotel for a bit. On Wednesday, which was the first day, we got our badges and everything, and I kind of hung out a bit. I think one of the main things I did that day was just playing some board games. I actually played some Sentinels of the Multiverse, which I haven't played in real life for a while. But one thing that I did, and I was there with my friend Deuce, who people who are familiar with the channel would have seen in the comments of the gaming streams, or over on the Untold Stories Project channel. I was hanging out with him for most of that day, and we played some board games. We put up like a little flag thing, because people could take out board games, and put up a little flag that says, hey, we're looking for extra players. So someone came by, we played a couple rounds of Sentinels, we played some Marvel Legendary, which is sort of like a deck building superhero game that I kind of want to get for our gaming group, because it's it's both collaborative and competitive in a way. So I don't know, I think it might work for our group, especially because we like to play, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name right now. The Dominion? Dominion, yes.
Yeah, the OG. Yeah. I think Dominion's probably I've never played a deck building game before Dominion, and then after that it feels like there's just so many of them now. So I'm gonna say that Dominion's the OG one. I think it is, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, and maybe I'll play a game that I've never played before. But yeah, Dominion. I will highly recommend everyone picking up Dominion for your collection of board games. There's so many expansions out, and it's literally an infinite possibility of games, because every time the deck building selectment of stuff changes, and it's loads of fun, and you get to pull off ludicrous strategies and break the game, and that's the whole point. Super fun, and yeah. Don't need to interject this ad for Dominion, apparently.
My strategy with Dominion is usually I found like a silly little thing to do, so I'll see what I can do with that. But yeah, with Legendary, because there's Marvel, there's like other themes of it, but it's kind of like you're sort of cooperating to achieve a goal, but you're also amassing your own victory points. So yeah, I think it could be really fun for our group. I'll see if I can find it at a store.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that would be kind of fun. I think there's a lot of Sentinels adjacent games out there that like take the same formula, but then like add like superheroes and cards are really cool, and then they add a lot of other stuff to it, and then it gets too complicated. So I'm definitely down to keep trying them and find another one that could capture that magic of Sentinels a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so, because it's a very fun concept. But yeah, that was, I think, the main thing I ended up doing that day. I did also do some prep work for a game I had to run later that week, which we will talk about. Thursday is the day that I had my first like scheduled game, which was a Mutants and Masterminds game run by RC, who, if people don't know, RC is the GM for Masks and Mayhem, which is the longest running Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition podcast. I think they're at like 6 years, I want to say.
Wow, that's a lot of superhero in. Yeah, that's like a whole movie universe worth of content to dive into.
Yeah. It's a really fun show. I'm catching up on some of their recent streams at the moment as well. So I would definitely recommend people check it out if you're into Muse and Masterminds, which has come up like multiple times on this podcast. The particular game that was run, it was a game that was streamed previously, featuring the Redacted Rangers, which is basically the Suicide Squad. We had to rescue an important VIP from an amusement park that had been taken over by these mythical creatures summoned by Dionysus.
Like actual, just real world Dionysus.
Yeah, he wanted a party.
I love it's just like all these made up people, and then just actually Dionysus. Like,
pretty much.
The original, that dude was made up so long ago.
Yeah, it was a really fun game though. We, of course, since we were criminals, we were secretly trying to free ourselves from the bonds that would explode if we went too far off track. And yeah, I thought the game was really fun. If people want to see it, they should definitely check out the Redacted Rangers Assault on Wondertainment stream, because it was kind of like that. Also on Thursday was the Great USP Bake Off, which was being run by a first-time GM using some custom game rules. Basically, it was a version of the Great British Bake Off, but with characters from the Untold Stories project, like various streams. And I'm sure we will talk about it in the future, but it was also, again, just very fun. I'm not much of a baker, but I got into the vibe of it pretty quickly.
I was gonna say, I mean, like, is this a canon event? That's what I want to know in the grand USP lore. Like,
as far as I'm concerned, it is. But yeah, it was a bunch of people from those streams. The players are choosing different characters, and they had their own like abilities in certain ways that would affect their roles. It was a very rules light system that I believe was based off a system someone had made, I think, for something similar to this, but then had edits that the GM made for the purposes of being a USB game. I do want to like talk to them more about it, because I wasn't able to get too deep into it at the time. But it was a pretty fun system. I'm hoping they do something with it again next time. And for all of the Freedom League Dark fans out there, I'm going to give a spoiler, but Gatorman did win. Which, again, if you've watched all the USB stuff, that's not too big of a surprise.
What? Okay, cool.
He's basically the heart of the team.
No.
So.
You don't have to go into context. I mean, I love the fact that it's just like Gatorman won, and you know why, and I'm just like, wow. That's true. I don't need context to enjoy that. That's awesome.
Fair enough. What else did I get up to? So Friday, and by this point they had set up like the dealer hall and stuff, so I'd wandered that a couple of times. I did pick up some. Actually, I'll talk about the stuff that I picked up at the end, but I got some stuff. I'll talk about the games first and try to keep things organized.
Yeah. Talk about the loot later.
Yeah. So Friday in the morning, I played Crash Pandas, which is it is a bunch of raccoons in cars trying to win a race. And this was something that we have played on USP before. Normally, it's all the players are a group of raccoons who enter a street race, and you're all trying to compete to win the race. You have to act as a team. In this version, there were like, oh gosh, how many teams were there? There was like 5-ish teams of 4 each, around 4 each, like 3 or 4 each, I think. And we were all competing with each other instead. And I'll put a link.
So yep. Like all the tables were a team, and they were all playing against each other, or is
yes.
it like all people at the table? Okay.
Exactly
That's wild.
I don't know if I'd be able to handle a game that size, but our GM did very well. So with Crash Pandas, and this is this is something that did come up in our gameplay, but the way it's normally played, you have your narrative stuff as you're setting up the race. You set up like items and abilities that you might have later. It's a very loosey-goosey system kind of in that way. But the way that driving works in the game is that you have 6 different things you can do when you're driving the car. Like you can accelerate, you can brake, you can turn left, you can turn right, you can use an item, or you can just do an action, like a miscellaneous action that isn't covered under any of those. But you can't confer with your team when you're choosing your action. You just choose it and then you all reveal it at once.
Oh, yeah, that's so funny. So like whoever gets the most, it happens, right?
I mean, pretty much. Like if 2 people say if one person says turn right, the other says turn left, and you just don't turn. Or if you both say turn, then you turn a lot.
That's so funny. Like if both of you guys say turn right, and then you guys are just reversed. That's so good.
But so what we ended up doing on my team is because there were 6 options and the GM had mentioned that someone had done this before, we were just like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. We chose our actions at random by rolling a d6, so we didn't know what we were doing until we revealed what was on the d6.
Oh no.
So everyone else had strategies and plans, and we were just, oh, I guess we're turning right. We did end up driving off of the map, just briefly. And the map was like one of those. It had like a enclosed road and like a bunch of toy cars and stuff. And we went off the map, and there was there was something there in the void.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed that game. I'm definitely going to do that again next year.
Yeah, that sounds super fun. You should run Trash Pandas for us. That would be fun.
I mean, I have been looking for a system to manage a Fast and Furious game.
Did you find it? Did you finally find it?
I mean, I might have to borrow some pieces of this. Just make my own system.
You should just do the system. You should just actually just run us through all of the Fast and Furious movies, but we're actually just raccoons. Like just take the storylines of it, but like just use Trash Panda and just be like all the races. It's just like everything that happens is just like we're just raccoons. Like
oh no, that's a really good idea.
That would be so funny. Like
oh my gosh, raccoons stealing DVD players.
Yeah. But they think like it's food, but it's actually just a bunch of DVD players and DVDs, and then it's like, what are we gonna do with all these DVDs? But now we're like in Dom's crew, like.
Oh my gosh, how are you all gonna get to Tokyo? Okay, no, I'm gonna figure this out. You just gave me a really good idea.
How are we gonna get to Tokyo? You say? Leave that up to us. Like.
Okay, that's going into the notes for the future. Yeah, so Crash Bandicoot was a ton of fun. And then that day, I had to cram in a bunch of Power Rangers because I was playing in a Power Rangers game. I had not seen the show before.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
it was it like a. I mean, I'm a big Power Rangers fan. Although I haven't watched it in a long time. I used to watch a lot of it when I was a kid.
I had basically watched like a couple episodes after I signed up for the game, and then before the game in the evening, I just watched the entire Tommy arc, the first Green Ranger arc.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good one.
Even though the stuff we were doing was mostly from the second season, so. But more importantly, that the Power Rangers Friday game is one of the highlights as well because so basically I went in there. I got to play the Blue Ranger because he was my favorite. But the game itself, it was a crossover with the Power Rangers, the Transformers, and G.I. Joe.
Okay.
So basically we get there. It starts off like a somewhat normal Power Rangers adventure. Although it also included some stuff from the Power Rangers comics as well, which is pretty cool. I might have to check those out too. But we ended up meeting some people we didn't recognize, including a person like this woman in disguise, as well as this robot in disguise, that were able to escape from us and pull off some sort of scheme. And then we were all brought together, and this was actually a really interesting way to do this sort of crossover event. All of the players were brought together for a meeting with Zordon and I want to say Alpha Trion from the Transformers, something like that. And the general who's the head of the G.I. Joes. And they had all the players basically in a half circle. And all the GMs were acting as these characters, explaining the situation that was unfolding. Basically, all of our enemies are working together to do some sort of reality-bending scheme, and we got to come together to stop them. We had a bit of a training montage where everybody learned to work together, but then reality broke, and all the players broke off into 3 separate tables again. So each table basically had 2 Power Rangers, 2 Transformers, 2 G.I. Joes, and we had to deal with one of the big bads from the various universes. So I ended up with the white. It was me as the Blue Ranger, and then the White Ranger. We were there with Optimus Prime and Ratchet, and a couple of the Joes. I want to say Rock and Roll, and the other one whose name I'm blanking on right now. But they were like a heavy weapons guy and an explosives guy. And they really cut through a whole bunch of the Transformer goons, like the Decepticon goons. They just blew up like the majority of them, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And we had to go basically deal with Megatron. But the way the reality bending thing worked is that we were given like these bracelets, these bands that were connected to the reality warping technology somehow. And we essentially had to step into these columns, these tethers that were holding the realities, like the remade reality. We had to step into there and sort of expose ourselves to some sort of... We had to basically do like a skill check in there, some sort of narrative check. Actually, sorry, no. Let me finish this and I'll explain the system after. But we had to do some sort of narrative-based skill check. That was something to do with our characters, like past, our histories and stuff. So some of the Joes, they saw like previous missions they were on. As the Blue Ranger, I was actually exposed to some ancient Cybertronian and then trying to sort of understand and conceive that. Also, it was very fun because I got the Blue Ranger to be able to understand ancient Cybertronian. And another highlight of the game actually was that some of the because they are leader characters, the White Ranger and Optimus Prime, they can provide different sorts of inspiration for other allies. So I got inspiration from both Tommy Oliver and Optimus Prime. So I was like, I'm living some kid's fantasy right now.
Yeah, dude, like this whole Saturday morning breakfast club thing is wild to me. This is definitely, some kid definitely just did this already in his bedroom.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. like that dude, like this is it, man. Like
it was a blast. I really had a lot of fun with that. We were playing with the Essence 20 system, which I thought was fun from at least the player perspective. I think, like I heard like from the GM perspective, it might need a bit more work in certain ways, but I had a lot of fun with that as a player. It's basically like you have 4 core essences. Let me see if I can figure out what they are.
Is it strength, speed, smarts, and social?
It sure is.
I just pulled up their character sheet. I love character sheets for explaining everything immediately.
That would be an easier way to explain things. Yeah, so we had like these 4 essences basically. We had our own like unique abilities, unique skills, and how they were tied to the characters. The skills were based on like rolling different die depending on your level in the skill. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I was making certain checks, I think my technology was like a D20 and a D6.
Damn, bro, Blue Ranger's crazy.
And yeah, it would do stuff like crits were based on getting the max on the skill die, so like the max on the D6, and also passing the check. So getting a 20 on the D20 wasn't like what I needed. What I would need is a 6 on the die, and a 6 on the D6, I should say, and then to pass the check, and then I would get like a crit on it, which I thought was interesting. Like I liked the idea of having a varied skill roll. I might need to play it a bit more just to see how it turns out, but I liked the idea of it not being so static, especially with a D20 based system, which can be very swingy when that's the only die you're rolling.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, without modifiers. Do you add modifiers to this?
There were certain abilities that let you add modifiers, like whose was it? Because Optimus Prime and the White Ranger could both do inspiration stuff. One was adding, one was moving your die up a step. I forget whose was whose.
Okay.
But yeah, there's ways you can add modifiers in there. But yeah, I thought the system was pretty interesting. I wouldn't mind trying it again. They did intend to have 4 tables because there's also a Essence 20 My Little Pony book. But unfortunately, they weren't able to organize it. So maybe next year, who knows?
I know the plot thickens next year.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Definitely like a highlight of the convention for me. And then on Saturday, I had a couple of things to deal with. So first off, there was a Pathfinder game in the morning, and I think I'm not gonna sign up for any more 8 o'clock in the morning games, but that's a whole other thing.
That sounds rough, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless you're like a morning person that just gets up, you just show up and be like, my character's sleepy.
I mean, pretty much.
I roll for coffee.
Pretty much that. I did get some good coffee though. There was some decent coffee in one of the places near the hotel. I don't want to say too much about where I was, but I will say there was a place that had decent coffee and a really good breakfast sandwich. That's the only review.
Yeah, shout out to those guys. They're the true heroes of that 8 o'clock fucking game.
True. But yeah, it was my first ever Pathfinder Society game. The intro to the Year of Unfettered Exploration. I was playing Koronika, a halfling sorcerer with demonic blood. And in the game, basically, as like newer, lower ranking members of the Pathfinder Society, you were tasked with helping out this higher ranking member who was about to get a promotion. Essentially, we had to show him around this maze on the Society property, as I recall, that already had certain planar effects to it, but now was showing like much more interactions from different planes, given stuff that was happening in some of the recent books, like Rage of Elements, like we were talking about recently. Mm-hmm. Basically, all the planes were sort of like intersecting with this one location. And we were just supposed to give him a tour and just basically occupy him for a few hours before the actual event. So we had to go looking for the guy, which took just a bit of searching to find him. He was, when we discovered him, he was, I don't know, I don't want to spoil too much, so I guess I should avoid saying too many details. He was just in an interesting situation involving a mimic when we found him.
Oh. I think there's an anime where that's from.
And then after that, we took him to one of the society lodges, but it turned out that there were some bandits inside of there, so he had a narrative excuse to be off screen while we got into some combat. I did discover some stuff I wanted to do with my character. This was my first ever society character as well, so there were certain things I had to get used to, especially because we're pretty loosey. Comparatively, we're pretty loose when we play. There were things like certain skill checks were supposed to be secret checks, right? Like you give your DM your stat, and then they roll it in secret, so you don't necessarily know the result of it. Which was one thing I messed up, because I think it was like a stealth check or something that I thought I had to roll. but they were actually asking for my number, or like my skill value in stealth or whatever it was. No, yeah. It was society. I remember because I rolled it and I got a really low number. And when I gave them the number, I think the GM thought like that was my skill number, like my value in that skill.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is probably fine. That won't come up again.
Yeah, I always think about like those secret roles. I think they're a lot easier to do on
like in a virtual,
yeah, because you're able to just pull that number. You can see all everyone's character sheets. I mean, some VTTs allow you to just do a secret roll as a GM from their sheet too, right? Like you could just do that. But I think like the thing is, it's like when someone asks you for a stat, it would just be like they're prompted to be like, "What's happening? Am I gonna die?" Right? And like that's the surprise, right? Like, yeah, you are, but like we just gotta find out how much. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I think there is value in that sort of thing. It's just we're so used to like not running things that way.
I'm so used to just not even rolling anymore. Like, I'm such a bad GM.
No.
I was like, yeah, whatever, kid. I was like, yeah, whatever, kid. You'd live your dream.
It's just been too long. But yeah, we ended up having to fight some bandits. I was relying quite a bit on the fear spell or the intimidation, which I was decent at, because I really like frightened as a condition. So I was mostly, I was mostly support stuff because my cantrip, Acid Splash, has splash damage, which is not very helpful when people are in melee. So I might have to, I might need to add some other attack spells in there as well. As well.
Just get like a firebolt to it, or that's just like the one I think I always choose when I make a spellcaster. Just pew pew. Get it.
I have the divine spell list. I don't remember what's on it, but we'll see.
Oh yeah, true. The divine spell list. Forget that spell list.
I mean, I can change it still. It's I'm not locked in until I level up, I think, or until I play like a certain number of games. I did also, over the course of the game, realize I need like a thieves toolkit and a healer's toolkit because I do have medicine and thievery, but I don't have the items I need to do stuff with them. Because I kind of want to be like that sort of like, I'm aiming for more of a support thing, where I can just fill in some skill checks as people need, because I don't want to be responsible for dealing damage. At least not.
Why not?
At least not exclusively responsible.
True.
I'm more interested in like, because like now with the divine list, I have heal as a spell and I have fear, so I can just sort of like heal allies, debuff enemies, that sort of thing.
Man, I feel like you just play like the same character every time.
No.
You're like the dude who like has the big thing, or you're the healer person. You're like, either way, you're responsible for everyone. Like, it's like,
I swear, if this character turns into a mom again,
it will, Calvin. It's like your final form is mom.
No.
You just care too much. You're like, all these PCs and NPCs. I must protect them because I'm having too much fun.
I mean, you're probably right. But yeah, we fought some bandits. We dispatched them pretty quickly. We caught up with our guy again. We started exploring the maze. We did run into some wisps that had escaped from the lodge after it was attacked. And they had run afoul of some other elemental creatures. So we kind of helped rescue them. We explored a bit. There was some weird elemental stuff. And then we ended up in a fight in a place that sort of like it was being affected by the plains. So basically there was water that was like ankle deep, but there was a shark that was swimming in it and was attacking us, which I got roughed up by pretty badly. Fortunately, we did have a cleric on the team. But yeah, I think it was pretty fun. I'm learning a bit more about how society games work. There's definitely stuff I want to do with my character that I think I will in the future. But I think overall the game was a lot of fun.
Cool.
I did end up missing my Starfinder Society game because I did have one planned for the next day, but that's just because I was kind of super tired. I was kind of wiped out. And that was because on Saturday evening, I took part in helping run part of Shadow War, uh, an event by the Untold Stories Project, based in Mutants and Masterminds. It was 7 tables of different characters from our various streams, and they had to deal with it was actually very similar to the Convergence or the Power Rangers Convergence thing that I did before, with more reality altering stuff. The grand overarching look at the plot is essentially like all the teams are split up into different dealing different villains that are all somewhat tied to the organization Shadow, which it's that big evil organization with a bunch of goons and a bunch of colorful lieutenant characters and an overall big bad with a mask and a cape, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But what Shadow was planning to do was to rewrite reality so that they had been in control, so that their overlord by the name of Overshadow had been truly in control of the world for all of history as far as people knew. By using
Overshadow is the best villain name. I like it. I like it a lot. It's like I am Overshadow.
It's very much on brand.
Yeah.
But yeah, they wanted to rewrite reality so that Overshadow was the ruler of Earth, and we had to make that not happen. So essentially, we start off with what seems like a normal superhero day. Then halfway through, all the players split up and switch tables, and they get mixed around, and we have to come back together to take down like certain parts of Shadow's overall plan, just tackling different aspects of it. So I can speak mostly for my table. What I was doing is I was dealing with the heroes of tomorrow, the next gen. Essentially the Teen Titans, Young Justice, Young Avengers of the USP, of Earth Prime, I should say, because they are a factor in the normal Mutants and Mastermind setting. But ours is, of course, quite different because it features like a bunch of legacy characters that are related to other characters in our games. So yeah, my first half was mostly that. Essentially, they started off in like a normal training situation very early in the morning. But then it was interrupted because something went wrong with the virtual reality hard light projection computer, which is essentially that some sort of alert was triggered on the computer that wouldn't let it process anything else until this was dealt with. And the players were able to investigate that it had something to do with their headmaster, Duncan Summers. It was related to basically a very old case that he seemed to have interest in, involving a villain by the name of Dr. Sin, who in the Mutants and Mastermind setting is basically like Ra's al Ghul from a Chinese background. That immortal crime lord sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the players were able to investigate that. It led them to a location where they were ambushed by Dr. Sin and a bunch of his ninjas, who were called Sinjas, and a bunch of goons from Shadow. But in the course of battle, the players were able to discover that, like, Sin was trying specifically to reach Headmaster Summers, because at some point in the past, Headmaster Summers, under the identity of the superhero Raven, was once the only man to ever really frustrate Dr. Sin, and he knew that Shadow was up to something, and he wanted them stopped because that would interrupt his own plans. Not so much an altruistic thing as I have my own goals, and this is going to, interrupt them sort of thing.
So he basically just poked the beehive to get them on the case of the Overshadow's plans, right?
Pretty much, because Dr. Sin is meant to be part of Shadow, but he was like, oh no, this is too much. This is not what I want. So let me find the one guy who I think can stop this old superhero.
This is too much crimes. This crime is too crimey for me. I like my crimes standard and to the book. I've been doing crimes a long time, and these newfangled kids on the block don't do crimes like they should, like back in my day. We used to just rob people for money, and now everyone's trying to rewrite reality. It's too much.
Yeah, he prefers the original recipe crimes. So yeah, the players were able to sort of like the way I was running it was that if they were able to speak to him sort of out of earshot of some of the shadow goons, they could reveal some details. And the way Dr. Sin was going about it was like, well, if Headmaster Summers isn't here, I'll just kidnap his students to get his attention. But very quickly over the course of the battle, the players were like, there's clearly something else going on here, so why don't you explain it to us? And, you know, with some negotiation, they were able to get him to be like, Shadow is up to something. They weren't able to get the details out of it, because as things were going on, everybody's table essentially got interrupted at a certain point, as reality broke and shifted. And then we took a break, and then we came back with a bunch of new people at the table. Some coming over from my previous half, some from different tables, some at different power levels, that sort of thing. And we essentially came into a new reality of the academy that the students go to. But now it's taken over by Shadow. It's dedicated to, you know, oppression and evil and all sorts of not so fun stuff.
Yeah, it's like the bad guy training ground now.
Yeah, literally. Until a certain way through when the player... So one of the tables at this crossover event are Agents of Aegis. Basically S.H.I.E.L.D., that sort of thing. And they were able to sort of recall the previous reality because of what was going on at their table. So partway through the second half, they split up and they went to separate tables, and there was someone playing Headmaster Duncan Summers, and he came to our table, and he was essentially able to give a message to a certain group of people that just happened to be the player characters of what had happened and how to stop it.
Oh, nice. I'm glad there was like a player who was like, "Oh, I'm the dude."
Yeah.
Like...
So yeah, he was able to deliver that message, basically like that. So the players then, they were tasked with... So every table had a certain aspect of taking down what Shadow had done. Because, you know, like this whole massive reality rewrite, it required a bunch of different elements to it. So what was going on at my table was that the supercomputer that was used to run the school, or more specifically run like the training programs and all that, it was being used to run these massive calculations needed for such a reality change. Even though it was a magic-based thing, it still needed a whole lot of complex math. So the players were tasked with like overloading the computer, basically, giving it too many things to focus on. Essentially, they head into the secret layer of the next gen of the teen superheroes. They basically overload the system by attacking it physically or hacking it, and the system would create like a simulation of the school around them and a simulation of other like young heroes around them that would attack them and try to stop them from doing this. So I had made, and I also like, I made some physical maps for this, which I kind of regret because they were very stressful to make. It was essentially just like printing out, like just finding a map online. My friend had like a bunch of maps that we could use. One of those, scaling it up to like actual size, and then printing it out on like 16 sheets of paper, and then taping those sheets of paper together. And
what are you doing, Calvin?
it was an ordeal.
Like what?
It turned out decently. Even though I didn't really use all of it. The map turned out decently. And I kind of wanted to take it home, but I couldn't make space. I didn't want to look at it, so I don't think I'm going to be doing that next year if I can avoid it. So they were fighting. Essentially, they had to destroy these 4 terminals while dealing with some heroes, some traps, that sort of thing. I did also... I got like a container of candy the day previously that was shaped like a soda can, so I just used that as a token for like an evil vending machine.
That's funny.
Which is pretty fun. And yeah, they were dealing with that, and then at a certain point, they were able to sort of shut down this computer, which meant that our part was finished, and then when the other table's finished, we were able to sort of end Shadow's plan. But as we were going on, some other elements that we had were that stuff was happening that could affect other people's tables. So, like, as one part of the plan is shut down, the enemies, they lose, like, a bit of a bonus to their toughness. For my part, when our part of the table was shut down, all the enemies people were fighting, they lost like a certain bonus to their attack rolls, as things were being destroyed piece by piece.
Ooh, that's pretty cool. So then it's kind of like snowballs a little bit in the player's favor. Things were looking kind of bad.
Mm-hmm. But then like they start sort of tilting the other way. In addition, what people could do is that they could roll on a certain table. Excuse me. They could roll on a certain table, and that table would have effects on reality as people were playing. So it could be a thing like, oh, suddenly your powers work differently, or you suddenly summon one of your enemies out of nowhere, or you make, or even just like smaller, simpler stuff. I don't have it in front of me, but it was stuff that you could do like with like these ripples of reality. So yeah, people were using those as well. There was a bunch of cool stuff going on. For my part, I feel like I was struggling a bit in the first half, but once we actually got into like the combat stuff, and once I broke out the evil vending machine, I think people were having fun.
People were like, yes, I want a Coke. Like,
I did struggle a bit with, because I had some certain traps set, but I was like, so like I had some characters that I knew weren't going to be too dramatically affected by certain things. But as play went on, I realized I have a bunch of very fast characters at my table. Because I had a teleporter there, I had someone in a like Iron Man suit there who could fly very fast. So I was like, okay, I think some of these traps aren't going to work out the way I expected them to.
Oh no, my pitfall trap didn't catch him.
He just flew over it. So yeah, there was a bit of that, but otherwise, I think they had a lot of fun in the latter half, once combat and everything started. I think overall the event went really well. I was very tired by the end and also kind of sick, if I'm being honest. I think I was a bit more anxious about the game than I would like to admit, so I felt very out of it afterwards. I was basically not talking very much. We were doing like just like a post-game wrap-up conversation, and then the next day I slept in, so I missed my Starfinder game.
Oof. Once again, Calvin doesn't play Starfinder.
Once again.
Dang, dude.
I'll play Starfinder one day, just you wait. But yeah, I feel like that crossover game, I think it went very well. Actually, speaking of Starfinder, because a couple of the people I was staying there with, like in the next room over, they had played Starfinder for the first time at the convention. They had played in a society game. And I was like, oh man, I hope we get a chance to play together at some point. But then on Sunday, I was just like, don't talk to me. I'm going to sleep. But yeah, no, I think the crossover went really well. I kind of wish I was a bit more prepared for it, because we were really on the fence about whether I was going to make it. So I wasn't involved in like some of the earlier meetings and stuff. But now that I'm definitely certain that I will be at Origins again next year, and maybe Gen Con, who knows? But since I'm for sure going to be at Origins next year, I'm going to be involved in that from an earlier stage. So hopefully I'm a bit more ready for certain things. I don't know, Ramon, is there anything you want to know about the big crossover table event?
No, it sounds really cool. It sounds really hard. But honestly, like I always love the idea of having like different tables, different groups of players like kind of interact with each other, in like a big grand scheme type of adventure or something like that. So all this stuff is always sounding pretty cool. It sounds like a hell of a lot of work. And so, you know,
you are not wrong.
I've never been to like I've never been to a gaming convention. They sound a lot of fun, but I think kind of being involved with that kind of stuff. So it sounds like a lot of commitment, and I am not afraid of commitment, but man, do I know myself very well. Like,
I think it helped that I was in the position where I just mostly needed to worry about my own table and my own stuff. Like, I ran my ideas by everybody. They worked for the overall, like, plot of the thing. So I just had to focus on my own thing. And I think that really helped, because I don't know if I would have been, like... I would have been too stressed if I had to contribute to any of the overarching plot.
Fair enough. And, like, so everybody had, like, pre-made characters. Did everyone get to select characters before showing up? Or did they just kind of walked in and was like...
That's another thing. So in the sign-up... people got a message that they could choose characters, and along with that, some people, they wanted to stick together, right? Because they're at a convention to play with, like, their friends, their family, whatever. So there was some complicated elements, and I'm very glad I was not the one that had to deal with this. But just, like, you know, people had the characters they wanted in list order of, like, how much they want a certain character, and then they might have also said, like, who they want to play with. So it was someone's responsibility to try to, like, maximize that for as many people as possible.
I guess you just run it through an Excel sheet and try and do it as best as possible, right?
Literally that, yeah. Which I am glad I did not have to do, because I don't know how I wouldn't even know where to start with that.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that, like, that aspect's pretty cool. I mean, I would love to do something like that for Lancer, because, like, you know, having, like, getting people into rolling some cool Lancer dice. But I think that, like, that game is a little bit more complicated. Not that Mr. Masterminds isn't complicated. It's just that it's a lot easier to be like, your stat's good, you roll the dice, and then your number's big, and then you compare it to the other number, right? I mean, Lancer's similar, but then there's, like, the tactics involved, and, like, some of the mechs, to really get the most out of them, you gotta do a bunch of complicated shit.
I kind of think, and I don't know if this is entirely true, but I feel like with Mutants and Masterminds, you might have a bit more of a range of enemies that you can at least be on the field with, versus in Lancer, because, like, we did have to compensate for different power levels, but I didn't feel like I was too off base with what I put down. Like, it wasn't too easy for the higher level ones or too hard for the lower level ones, in a way that I don't know if it's as easy to do or as possible with Lancer.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the biggest deal is, like, maybe making the team, the actual, like, Lancers at the table, like, their team, if they're making pre-gen characters, or they're using pre-generated characters, that team makes sense. Right? Or, like, maybe just, like, have a little bit of, like, this is your role in the team, right? And this is, like, why, especially for people who haven't played Lancer before. And maybe you'll have, like, a team that's, like, more forgiving, and maybe you have, like, a team that's more advanced. So if you're like, hey, if you want to just fucking go at it with some crazy stuff, here's these characters that are higher Lancer level, go at it. Or maybe it's like you can show up with your own pre-made Lancer as long as you're follow these rules, and then just do it, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
it'd be interesting.
That's one thing to think about, because I think we're just going to be talking about Origins, because I just saw how much time we've taken up, but that is one thing to think about, because I do want to run Lancer at the convention next year. Like, one thing I bought... Oh, actually, let me talk about the stuff that I got, and then I'll talk about next year.
Oh, yeah.
Because one thing I did get, though, was some Battletech maps that I think will be good for running Lancer, because they are mech scale hex grid maps, which are very rare indeed. I saw some people on the Lancer Reddit talking about using maps like that, and how, like, the scale is a bit weird considering how, like, the Lancer movement speed and things like that. But I feel like if I just condense down how much of the map I use, it'll probably be fine. Especially the maps that I got. So I think I could run something interesting with those. I also got, we stopped at a place that had dice. You could buy a specific set of dice for like $15, I think it was, or you can spend $10 to get a random set of dice. Like, you roll a big D20, and depending on what you get, you can choose dice from one side of a box or the other.
So that's pretty cool.
It was pretty fun, but I ended up getting some very plain dice. They were literally just like white with black text.
Nice.
But they are super readable, so that's going to be useful.
Yeah, I think there's like a sweet spot of dice where it's like it's just cool enough to be interesting, but still legible from a distance. And yeah, there's some people out there who like just believe in like I want the most ornamental shit possible.
Yeah, I've gotten some dice that looks cool, but then they're harsh to read. So I'm not too mad about the plain dice because I'm looking at that and I'm thinking I'm not gonna have any trouble reading this at all. What else? Oh, I painted a mini for the first time ever. I found one that was like this little like cloaked. I think it was supposed to be like a halfling or something, but it reminded me of Brima from the Fateseer campaign that I've talked about on here like a billion times. So I tried doing some painting with that. I think the face got a little smudgy, but I kind of like how the cloak and the cape ended up, because Deuce, again, like he gave me some advice on painting, especially putting like highlights on certain areas. So I tried that on the cape, and I kind of like how it turned out.
Yeah. Painting capes are fun.
Yeah.
They're pretty chill. I'll show you how to use some contrast paints, and they make painting with a lot of detail pretty awesome and easy. Except I can't do faces either, so that's fine.
I was thinking like, because one of my other friends there, she ended up painting like this tower thing, and I really like how it turned out, and I kind of feel like I might enjoy doing like terrain stuff like that more, you know, or like vehicles, like stuff that doesn't have a face but I can still do like details with.
Yeah, terrain is a lot easier because you could get, I mean, depends on what you want, right? Like I'm a pretty fast and loose guy when I paint. So if something's got a lot of texture, like dry brushing is your bread and butter, and like just kind of like getting something that at a first glance it's like, wow, it looks really good. But if you look at it for too long, you're like, oh. Like that's where I play. I want something that's like enough to play with. I'm not trying to win competitions.
Fair enough. There were some stuff there that was for competitions. I saw an owl bear there that was just amazing.
Yeah, people are mind blowing when they paint stuff, and I'm like, geez, man, like how are you this good? Like I don't get it. It's wild.
It was just incredible. But yeah, no, I'm really happy with how my little token turned out. And I don't know, I might just have to start painting more. I could see how people would be drawn into this hobby.
Yeah, well, it would be cool to maybe find a model or something that you could just bring to the table when we play IRL with whatever character we're rolling up with. Those things are pretty fun.
I was originally looking for one to represent my Rune Lord's character, but then I saw the other one and I was like, this is like exactly Brima, so I gotta do it.
That's fair.
What else? That was kind of the main things. Other than that, just buying a lot of food. I realized American food portions are very, very big. Like even Subway felt bigger somehow.
Dude, I don't know what the U.S. is doing, because I was also recently in the U.S. and I was like, yo, I don't know where I am, but everywhere I turn, there's like decent food, like, and it's like way cheaper than I think it's always gonna be, and I'm always way more impressed with it. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on up here, but down there, like, holy.
Right. Like I got pizza from somewhere and I got like the small one, and I was like, okay, this will be good for like lunch or whatever. I could not eat that in one sitting. I don't know how other people did it.
Shit.
And it was really good too, but it's just like I need a break.
Food's too good, everything's too fun, Calvin's having too much of a good time. Sounds like a good convention.
It really was. That's why I want to go again next year. And I don't know, I might have to figure out Gen Con for next year as well, because I would love to go there because there's always a bunch of cool Pathfinder stuff there. Always a bunch of cool Paizo stuff in general. But yeah, next year, I do, like I was saying before, I do want to run Lancer. And there's some behind the scenes stuff that I also want to figure out that I'm probably not going to mention here just yet. But I do want to run a Lancer game in real life at Origins next year. That's going to be, I am on a new training arc. That's going to be my goal. By next year, I want to be able to run a really good Lancer game in person. I don't know what it'll be, because I still have to figure out like my holiday Lancer game, because that's gonna be a yearly tradition, I guess. I don't know.
We gotta keep this Christmas turkey thing going, man.
I don't know how I'm gonna top Turkey Dora.
It's true. It's okay. We still got Santa Claus out there.
Yeah, and his 8 reindeer drones.
I know, right? Like.
But yeah, that's gonna be a plan for sure. And of course, whatever USB crossover events we come up with, I want to be involved like earlier in planning for that, just so I have like a better sense of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think of anything else to add on there, but in general, just yeah, I just in general had like a really good time. I also the addition of just like meeting everybody in person that so far I've only seen like on the other side of a screen was very nice. Getting to hug a bunch of people was very nice. I'm very sad now because I gotta wait another year.
Yeah, that's always the problem. We have too many good people and everyone's so far away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, no, I had a great time. I'm already looking forward to doing it again. Nice. As soon as I catch up with sleep, because I feel like I'm still catching up with sleep.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I don't know, Ramon, is there anything else you want to know about the convention? Because I think this is just gonna be the episode.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a real fun time. I mean, obviously going to convention is super cool usually, and I definitely have never really experienced something like that, but it's definitely on a list of things to do, so maybe I'll join you next time.
Ooh, that would be a blast. And yeah, if I go to others, I mean, like I said, I do want to try Gen Con. I haven't been to Fan Expo in a while. I kind of wish there was more tabletop stuff at Fan Expo, but maybe there is something that I don't know about yet.
Yeah, maybe you should contact them and be like, I'll run some shit.
Ooh. I'll have to think about that. But yeah, anybody else out there who went to the Origins Game Fair or who's gone to other gaming conventions and you want to talk about your experiences, just post them in the comments below if you're on YouTube, or tell us about them if you are on Spotify or any other podcast platform. Or you can just reach out to us through our website, winwithdice.ca, where we have a message section that you can send messages through. In addition, on the YouTube channel, there are gaming live streams if you want to check them out. It's been a while, but everything should be starting to get back on schedule at some point. The schedule right now is Thursday for Titanfall 2, going to be wrapping that up. Friday for Baldur's Gate 3, either the main campaign or the crossover campaign with Untold Stories Project. And then Sunday, Alan Wake 2, which I really do want to get back into because I want to refresh on the mysteries in that game. In addition, I want to shout out all the people we have linked below, again on YouTube. All the Lancer writers and creators, go ahead and check out their stuff if you're into the Lancer RPG. Check out Eld's Soar RPG. And also, I want to give a shout out to, since I've been mentioning them a dozen times, the Untold Stories Project. Check them out on Twitch, on YouTube, on their website. They're a really good group of people. There's a lot of really fun tabletop streams over there. A lot of Mutants and Mastermind streams. A lot of different games going on. Just go ahead and check them out. I love hanging out with that group, so I want to make sure to shout them out as many times as possible. But I think that is everything I have so far. I can't think of anything else I need to say. If there's something I'm forgetting, then it'll be linked below. I don't know. Ramon, anything else before we head out of here?
Nah, cowboy, we're good.
Alright. Yeah, Howl of the Wild next week.
We promise. We'll get there.
So, for all of our reality-bending GMs and players out there, just remember to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.